Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Run, Walk, Talk, Tales of Inclusion and Development. I'm Steph, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm here with Judy, and her pronouns are she and her. And today we are going to talk about the very fascinating and interesting topic of boundaries and burnout. We're going to explore boundaries and burnout. We're going to talk about how it has affected us on a personal level, speak out what we've noticed in our workplaces, and also sort of strategies that have helped us through, our many years of being in the corporate spaces. So let's start off with, I always like a good quote, and actually it's more of an interesting stat, let's say. So in 2021, the World Health Organization estimated that globally burnout causes it's $1 trillion in productivity.
Wow.
1 trillion. And I think we all know it's a lot, but when you see that number in various articles and research papers, it just really hits home how it's not just a one location or city or continent. And when we also talk about burnout, I think it's good to sort of start with what's that definition? How do we define it? Maybe, Judy, I'm going to jump in. I'll give you a little bit of my definition, and I'd like to hear if it's similar or, what comes up
Absolutely.
for you.
Yep.
So for me, it's that state of like physical, emotional, mental exhaustion that sort of happens over an extended period of time where I feel like there's no sight and end. And it's not like your weekend isn't going to fix it. If you just sleep, if you work a typical potentially Monday through Friday job, and if you just rest on Saturday and Sunday, you're going to be fine on Monday. What are your how do you think about burnout?
Yeah, well, no, I love what you've just said, and that's really resonating for me. And you started with the stat from the World Health Organization, and I've got their definition here, which is, it's the feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. So what you're describing, it's your exhaustion to a place where a little bit extra sleep isn't going to suddenly solve the issue. And then they note, and I think this is quite interesting, that it's this increased mental distance from one's job or negative feelings towards your career. So you're actually at this place where it just starts to color the way that you're seeing your work.
Yeah.
And then the reduced professional productivity. So you don't have anything more in the tank to give.
Yeah.
And I think what you're describing is your own personal take on it. Absolutely. Like you're spent. You're done.
Yeah.
There's nothing more.
Yeah. And I think what's also interesting about burnout too is like once you have the definition is like what causes that burnout. And when I was, thinking about what causes it and looking at sort of the various kind of research around it, so there were things that came up, lack of role clarity, lack of communication or support from your manager. Managers are so, like, they are a crucial role in corporations, right? Time pressure, like unreasonable time pressure, too much work, unfair treatment kept coming up. Am I missing anything? Have you sort of seen anything
Well,
else?
I think you've named all of the things, but what I also think is interesting about what you said is, we're looking to managers to notice burnout in people, but managers are burning out. Executive C-suite level is burning out. And it's really hard to be watching for those signs in other people if you're depleted and you have nothing left to give.
Yeah.
And I think it is a comment on we need to make sure people managers in particular aren't burnt out so that they can care for their teams.
That's right. Yeah. That middle layer. And also I think a lot of the studies also talked about how HR professionals too, going through COVID, there was so
HR professionals, and I'm thinking about medical professionals.
Yes.
And, I mean, it's affecting every industry, really.
Yeah. So let's talk. So we've kind of talked a little bit about a definition, what causes it. And I mean, curious, Judy, have you ever sort of suffered from burnout, and what kind of strategies or things, have helped you?
Yeah, well, and I absolutely did, and it happened a few years ago. And the other piece of burnout, and I mean, Steph, you're like me. We're like the type A personalities, and we want to do a good job. We
Yeah.
want to do the best job at everything that we do, and that's often who is more susceptible to burnout. So
Yeah.
yes, I did go through a period of burnout, and I think what surprised me is, and I sort of matched all of those symptoms. I was completely depleted. I felt a lot of anger because I couldn't do the work that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I will say is there was a lot of work that I was doing at that time that wasn't in the learning and development space, and it wasn't really bringing me joy. So there's also some
Mm.
studies that have shown if you're doing work that's not work that is fulfilling,
Yeah.
that can also cause burnout more quickly. Albeit it also is, as you mentioned earlier, just the workload and the hours that you're working. And that, so I had a burnout. I remember saying to my husband at one point that there's like 1 hour in the day where I'm not either working or sleeping. And it kind of hit me like I wasn't doing anything but work. And so the good news for me is that my role within the organization changed, and I got
Yeah.
to focus on L&D
Yeah.
and but for me, I started taking courses. Like I started taking all sorts of courses to make myself better. And because I thought, well, if I can just get better, I can get over this burnout, I can get back to
Yeah.
work, everything's going to be amazing. And for me, I realized that when you get to that state where you're completely depleted, it's a journey back. So,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it probably took me in retrospect. I mean, I was still working and producing, and don't get me wrong, like a lot of people, we still keep going. But I would say it probably took me a good 2 years to come out of that and really feel like myself again and really feel really
Yeah.
excited about work. And as you say, it's not
Yeah.
like I could just get a little bit of extra sleep. There was a lot of things that I needed to work through. How about for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Yeah. A few years ago as well, I think what led to my burnout was unfortunately, I was in a toxic environment, a work environment, with a manager that wasn't kind of, as supportive, communicative, and really, I found it fascinating how my self esteem took a dive. That I really questioned the work that I was doing, if I was doing the right thing, when I used to be sort of quite confident in my work. And yeah, I just remember one day looking at my husband going, I can't do it anymore. And it was that sort of that sense of depletion of things have to change. And I had to, after many years of working, I had to take time off. I took a short-term disability to like step away, and honestly, it was a lot of sort of sleeping, if I now think of sort of some of these strategies, right? It's like I slept a lot. I read, I walked in nature, I watched funny shows. Um, I talked about things, I journaled, all of those sort of self care things that I needed to do to kind of get back to what sort of was that normal before.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Steph, it's wonderful that you did that, and I think sometimes there can be a stigma attached, or
Oh,
we think, oh, I
yeah.
can't step away, I can't
Oh,
take time.
yeah.
Um, but you found for you, it really you needed it. It was necessary.
Yeah, and I think you also bring up, yeah, so there was this stigma, and it really was, can I just sort of keep going? Like, can I just try to keep going? Because I did for a long time. And also I really recognize kind of from the equity lens that I had another partner who was working. So that privilege to be able to, like, it wasn't like I drained our life savings in,
Right. Yep.
and
Yes.
and I
Yes.
and I acknowledge that, and not everybody not everybody can, take that time away. Yeah. Um, and I think when we talk about sort of burnout, let's sort of talk about some of these, from a gender perspective, being women in the workforce, kind of like, how do you see that sort of some of these challenges and societal pressures that, the world kind of puts on women that kind of contribute to burnout? How do we navigate those challenges?
Yeah, well, I think it's a huge area, and one of the books that I'm reading right now, and is Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle,
Yeah.
by the Nagowski, and I hope I'm saying that right, sisters, Emily and Amelia. And the book is about that, about how women experience burnout differently. And what I really like about the book is that it talks about, because I think sometimes if you're going through burnout, you feel that you have to do something,
Yeah.
and if only you could do something, you can make yourself better.
Yeah.
And what their book speaks about is what's going on in society, things like the patriarchy, that, like there's a whole system in place that really for women, we experience things differently. We're used to being caretakers in many situations. We're taught to give and to make sure everybody's doing okay, and often to put people, and I mean, this is generalizing a little bit, but in many cases, women, we're raised to make sure everybody else is doing okay.
Yeah.
And if we just give a little bit more, and so they're saying, burnout isn't just something that happens to the individual, but it happens because of the way that our societies are set up. And I know that there's a lot of writing happening right now about the importance of rest, and how we're in this society where we're just expected to be continually working and giving more, and really looking at, and this book addresses it as well, how important rest is. Like, we need a certain amount of sleep, you need a certain amount of rest, and how you're actually more productive if you get that rest. So you might think, oh, I'm going to work a 13, 16-hour day, I'm going to get lots done, and you're actually, you reach a point where you're really not producing anything of value.
Right. Right.
No matter who you are.
Yeah. So,
and I don't think we talk about that enough.
No, we don't. We don't talk about sort of rest and how we, figuring out kind of your rhythm in the day. And again, this is sort of, if you have a corporate job, you have that sort of, one of the things talking about burnout is this Women in the Workplace study that recently came out from leanin.org. They release it every year. And this idea around flexibility and remote work and how that helps, when you have that kind of flexibility and autonomy, right, over your job, it helps and allows you to, you just feel more productive, because you could work early in the morning and then you can take a little break in, later in the morning, or, because maybe lunchtime is sort of your most productive time and you could sort of work through lunch, or maybe it's in the evening to get some things done,
Well, and that ties so nicely into when we think about, hybrid and corporations.
Yes.
We're at this place where people are starting to say we need everybody in the office, and people are like, oh my goodness, I'm finally having work-life balance. Because the beauty of hybrid is you can choose. You may be somebody who being in the office works for you. You may be somebody who wants to be at home. You may be somebody where there's a combination of both. Again, recognizing that not all jobs are set up so that people can have that hybrid way of working. But if we think of, just getting some laundry done during the day, or getting a few things done and working according to our own schedule and autonomy, I think that's why people are so hesitant to give up that sort of hybrid working environment.
Yeah. So we are coming to time. So Judy, one takeaway from today, our discussions on burnout.
Yeah, so I want to look at that, the study you cited with, I think you said it was the Lean In organization has done some work, because I think it's really important to be looking at the information that's out there. And I also like that you started with the monetary amount, because I think that's important too.
Yeah.
Companies recognizing that it's a financial cost to the organization. And then also just that whole notion of after a certain point, people really, doesn't matter who you are, you're not producing that the quality of work. So
Yeah.
what are we going
Yeah.
to do about it as organizations?
I know. I know. For me, I will say it's the topic of rest. I think it's really looking into taking that time for more
Hmm.
rest and almost doing a bit of research on rest. I'm sure there's a bunch of different books. So if any readers have some good books on rest, please send it our way. So thanks everyone for joining today to talk about boundaries and burnout. And we'll see you next time.